Good morning, everyone. Welcome to Accuracy in America, brought to you by Accuracy in Academia. I'm your host, Don Irvine, joined by my co-host, Brian McNichol.
Good morning, everybody. Welcome to the show.
Welcome to show. Episode number, what did I say it was? 358. We're just kind of
Getting there.
chugging along, getting there. Yeah. If I wasn't absent so much, we'd be a lot higher.
All right, so tell us the absent.
So the absence, so there's the change in the schedule won't take effect for a couple more weeks. So we're here today. Obviously, we'll be here at the regular time and date next week. The following week, we're going to switch to Thursday at 11, and then after that, we will be off for 3 weeks as I will be in Asia, uh, going hopefully seeing uh, squeezing in a trip to see my cousins, some of my cousins who I haven't seen in 56 years.
Wow.
So yeah, that I've been in contact with them. Only one has really answered me back, but I because they're all because these two of them are related to each other, and the other one is in the same area, in the same city area. I think I can get three, and I really actually don't have any idea how many cousins I've got in Japan and how many were living anyway. That part of my family history genealogy is pretty weak, and doing family history in Japan is really tough. You have to so many hoops, so many
Yeah,
things.
you know what? I'm from a big family, but I do know most of them.
Yeah.
And that people don't realize that's not a given anymore.
No, it's not. It's not. I mean, I I have a pretty good, I know who my cousins are here in the U.S., but on my mother's side, because I'd only visited Japan once, and I had a cousin who lived with us for about a year when I was about 9. Uh, my interactions with my Japanese relatives was pretty limited, and now it's been 5.5 decades. My parents' generation, they're gone, so now we're dealing with my generation, and we're no spring chickens.
Yeah.
so I don't know, and I don't know how many of those cousins that I'm going to see actually know who the other cousins are and whether or not they're still alive. So I figure if I get these three, that'll be pretty good. Then I'll consider it a success. So cross your fingers. We'll see what
There you
happens.
go. Safe travels.
All right. So besides that, just a brief weather announcement. It got cold.
Yeah. Winter is not done yet.
The calendar
It's
says
bright and
spring.
sunny, but it is.
Yeah, yeah. I
Yeah,
mean,
and I saw some games out in the Midwest. Some of the baseball games were moved from nighttime into the daytime because of, I guess they're getting a little precip with the cold out there. So at least we're not into that.
yeah. I mean, I remember years ago. I think I was at something. What was that meeting? One of those conservative meetings I used to go run around. I don't know if it was either Philadelphia Society or it was the Heritage Foundation Resource Bank or something like that. But those things take place, like in April. You traditionally or had at
Yeah.
that time. And one of the meetings took place in Chicago. Actually, it probably was a back-to-back meeting. I think it might have been the 30th anniversary of Philadelphia Society. So I think they actually backed them up together so that people could attend both if they were members of both. And and so baseball was being played in Chicago, but people were like,
Oh yeah.
it does get cold in Chicago. It's still cold, in the
That's
springtime.
right. And you got to be careful about it because, like, so we were there one time in April, I believe, May, and maybe early May for a coaching clinic. And we had a Friday afternoon. We were open. We could go to the game. So we go out. So we're staying in like Naperville because the place where the clinic was like DuPage County Community College or something. And so Naperville, it's 75 degrees, but at Wrigley Field, it's 52. 52 is different than 75 in the coat wearing area,
Yeah, I mean they have wind that blows in and too.
Yeah, that's right.
Too, right?
It was a
So
windy, brisk day. But since I knew that, like I had enough coat, so it was all right.
could dress like you're almost in Russia,
Yeah.
Siberia. All right, very good. Beyond that, geez, I guess there was some news overnight. It
I've
was
heard some news. Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know. Nothing major. We can move on from that. There was nothing really big there. So this has been kind of interesting for me. I mean, and I have undoubtedly struggled with this whole Iran war because it just seems to be so zigzag up and down and whatever. But then again, it's also very emblematic of the Trump administration of sometimes it's just misdirection, sometimes it's a subterfuge, just whole mix of things, but there is kind of this end point and there is a goal and things like that. But we were talking last week. We're getting towards the end of Trump's original plan about how long it would take to go in, make the necessary changes in Iran, and then take it from there. And so last night at 8 o'clock was the deadline. I love his language just does make me kind of laugh though. He's like, you know, we're going to obliterate the civilization. We don't want to, but we're going to have to. We're going to go after their power plants, blah blah. Which has had a lot of mixed reaction from some of the conservative and MAGA base because they're like, exactly how many civilians are we talking about here and what's going on here and stuff like that. But what was it? An hour or less before that deadline comes the announcement that they're going to have a 2-week ceasefire. There's a proposal on the table. The Strait of Hormuz will likely reopen, and so we've got some time now to kind of sort some of the nitty gritty out, and in the meantime, some things will get back to somewhat normal. But when you've been backed up for what has it been now, 40 days, it won't happen overnight. But it's better than not having any movement in the Strait of Hormuz to begin with. So I'm pleased we're moving in that direction.
Yeah. So yeah, it looks like that. He was going to. It was what was it? Bridge and power plant day. That's what it was.
It's kind of like arm day and leg day.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. So the thing about it is like, Trump treated these guys like uh, corrupt people in the construction business that he's dealt with his whole life, right? He's like, it's just another corrupt organization. And so he went at it with, the kind of intimidation that they use in those kind of things. And the Iranians, people forget this. They take everything they say at face value, and you can take almost nothing they say at face value. They're famous for being duplicitous negotiators, right? You think you've agreed to something, and they have you down agreeing to something entirely different. That's their entire history, and Trump knows this, and so he is trying to make it where, whatever agreement you make with me is going to be one that you do actually honor, right? He wanted to get it to the point where none of the mullahs are around, but I think that the principle has been established, right? If you govern like that anymore, we're coming back. We're not putting up with it. We're finishing the job. So it'll be interesting to see what happens in this 2 weeks. If Iran violates the ceasefire, then it means whoever we're negotiating with does not control the military, right? Because presumably they would be under orders at this point not to fire at anyone. If they do hold it, then we are talking to the right people. Someone put out word, and I haven't seen this verified, so I'm a little skeptical of it. But that the mullah, the Khomeini's son, who was supposedly, elected after he was killed, has approved this negotiation. He signaled that he wants this to happen. So I don't know if that's, does he have the influence? Do they still care what he thinks? Right? Because there's this other guy, foreign minister or something, who's kind of been the lead person on it. So it's kind of hard to tell, like, who on the other side, where are we with the people on the other side? And, I think Trump knows. I think he knows who they're dealing with. But I think that's the first thing is, like, are the people on the other side legitimately the people we should be negotiating with?
Yeah, and there are some objectives I think that were achieved on this. It was to get rid of the leadership, and we have by and large, wiped out their top leadership. So they've had, they're going to their B team at this point in time, trying to fill the gaps and everything like that. And I remember how you said, it's like, who wants to be a leader in Iran when because as soon as you're the leader, the target's on your back.
That's right.
Right. So, and we have Israel, which has been, very aggressive in attacking this. They figure, with the U.S., by their side, their strength in numbers, and they can go do this, something they have probably been chomping at the bit to do for quite some time. So we have that, we can argue whether or not this was really an imminent threat or not. I don't think it was imminent as, when we first hit them, that it was going to happen the next day or two, a week. But at some point in time, with Iran and with their nuclear capabilities, they weren't just going to sit there. I don't think they were going to sit, they weren't going to sit forever on that. So they
I
were.
think the momentum was clearly going toward developing a weapon. And it leads me to one of the things that, we need to talk about here is they had a missile that could reach Europe, and we didn't know about it. Mossad didn't know about it. U.S. CIA didn't know about it. U.S. military didn't know about it. Nobody in the world knew it. Okay, so they were able to keep secrets a little better than we judged them for. And if they had that missile, there's not a whole lot of technology between reaching Europe with the missile they proved they had and reaching the U.S. Right? You got to add some stuff to make it happen, but it's not. You're not at ground zero starting. You're 90% of the way there. Not much more to add to be able to reach us with a nuclear weapon. Are they interested in nuclear? Well, they've said so repeatedly, and they have done everything they can to hide their nuclear program and to preserve it and preserve the people running it. Now, so a new thing happened. Kind of the new thing of this war is, and because I'm not sure that we've ever really had the technology to do that before. But like you think about the Civil War, right, in the U.S. Like Lincoln got assassinated, at the end of the war, but it was a guy who was an actor in a play, and he went to see the play, and so it was kind of a plot you couldn't really think about how to foil, but we're now it wasn't done at the orders of Robert E. Lee or Jefferson Davis or anybody like that. It was just a guy and his friends figured out a way to do this and did it, right, from what we know of the history of it. Okay, but what we're doing now, you think about the way this war was fought. The objective, a big part of the objective was to kill the relevant people, right? Usually, like Ukraine is fighting Russia, right? Russia is not explicitly trying to kill Zelensky. Russia has military aims, right? But it's not, we're going to go kill Zelensky and his 25 top deputies. We're going to go kill Putin and his 25 top deputies. But that's what we're doing here. And when, one team, well, and it was 50, it wasn't 25 to start with, right? Are killed. They find 50 more guys. This is the 50 deputies. Now they've wiped out the 50 deputies, right? They're about 4 teams down on nuclear science. They have, the biggest impediment to Iran resurrecting its nuclear program after all this is that all the people involved with it are dead, right? Because we killed them systematically. There might be 1 or 2 that we missed, but they just don't have the people anymore. The people who are qualified to do that are gone. So, so now, you say, okay, we didn't really degrade the country. We definitely have done very little to civilians. I know everybody's, the schoolgirls or whatever, you're going to hear about that forever. But, in the course of a war, if you have one of those, you're doing pretty darn good, right? So, what I'm saying is, we're fighting this a different way. We're just decapitating the leadership, where it's not a big bunch of infrastructure that's been destroyed. It's weapons infrastructure, mainly defense infrastructure, not civilian infrastructure. There's not very little civilian deaths, right? Other than strategic stuff, very little damage to the country. It's all been centered on killing the people responsible.
Yeah, I mean, it's been very different than how Israel has taken on Hamas. But they were forced into that situation by Hamas attacking them, and then Hamas has got a bunch of tunnels and hidey holes and whatnot, and the only way to get there is that you got to take out a lot of buildings to see where the heck it is, and they've been decapitating leadership as well. Unfortunately, the collateral damage are lots of infrastructure there, but then that's where Trump says, hey, look, we have plans, we could do a bunch of things over there, if we
Right.
get the rubble cleaned up. But you're right. I mean, I like the more precision of trying to take out the leadership. You cripple the program by taking out the people that are the strategists, whether it's on the military side or whether it's on the scientific side. I mean, you cannot build a nuclear program and make these things work without these scientific minds. And if you kill them, unfortunately, somebody's got, this is going to happen. But they elected, they have those jobs, and they've been doing them for years, and they built up this arsenal,
Yeah.
which is a threat to everybody else in the world. We can't let that happen. I do know that, if Trump hadn't done this could have been, we were heading, on a course to disaster, because there would not be probably another president that would be willing to do that. Sans maybe, if JD Vance got elected or something like that, some kind of Trump acolyte or whatever. But if the Democrats, get control of things, there's no way they were going to go after Iran. I mean, Obama was, he was just falling all over himself to give Iran everything they wanted and play
Plane
nice.
loads of cash, unmarked bills.
Yeah, you're just playing. He's just being, So
And here's the thing about that: it did not work. Right. The thing
No.
we need to remember is trying to do it the nice way did not work. Right. They can say, "Well, things were," no, they were developing a nuclear program. Regardless of JICPOA or whatever, Iran did not stop trying to achieve nuclear capability for the explicit stated purpose of wiping out Israel. Now the other thing is, I think Israel at its widest point is about 40 miles wide. In northern Israel, where Tel Aviv is, it's about 12 miles wide. So what nuclear bomb can you drop that's only going to hit that peninsula, right? It's not going to damage all the stuff around it. So I mean, I think the rest of the Arab world is like, yeah, that's kind of us. We kind of get that one too. So, it's in our interest that this not really happen.
Yeah, well, I mean, we have history of, all we have to do is look at Hiroshima and Nagasaki and see, you drop this bomb, but the radius is huge.
Yeah.
So the fallout from all of that is tremendous from all of this. Yeah, and as I recall, when Biden took office, Trump had made some changes in the nuclear deal after he took over from Obama. But as I recall, I don't think Biden didn't, he didn't completely roll all those back, and kind of remember, I was thinking at the time, it's like, oh, this is kind of interesting because, the general thing is that you when you come in, you kind of reverse a lot of what your predecessors done. But it's almost as if the people in the administration said, this one, not so much so. There's some things that probably ought to be kept in place. But it was still large. It's still largely in place. So Trump.
Well, he sent John Kerry over there to tell him we wouldn't mess with him.
Yeah.
But
what Trump has done here on foreign policy is well above and beyond anything any Democrat would ever even think about or try to do.
That's right.
So Trump's going to have a fascinating legacy when he leaves office. I mean, there's plenty of ups and downs, and just sometimes some questionable things along the way, but there's no doubt that he was committed to making certain things happen, and they have happened as a result. And he has really kind of ripped through things that where world leaders are just like, we don't know what's going on here. We don't. And it's like, you better get on board. If you want, this is the Trump train goes in this direction. And we're not waiting for others. I mean, he was highly critical of NATO, not really doing anything and things like that. So, he's questioning old norms
Right.
And rightfully so,
Right.
in this
So
regard.
yeah, so NATO, that's a good thing. Let's talk about that. Like, what should we do about NATO? Right? I mean, especially now. I mean, because they cannot deny that they didn't stand with us on this. Right? They were a problem. We had to fight NATO to accomplish this. Okay, and they're the biggest beneficiaries of the Strait reopens. Right? We don't get oil from there. They do. They need this. Okay, China's involved because China sees it's a big problem for them. That's why the Packies are doing the negotiations, because the China asked them to, because they got to get this cleared up, because those people, our geopolitical enemies, need the oil to come through Strait of Hormuz. Okay. We asked for various little ways of helping us. Can we land a plane? Can we fly over your country? No. Okay, it's like, okay, all right, we hear you, we got you, but you're going to ask us for help before we ask you for help, right? We're consequential help that we can't do without. You're going to ask us before we ask you. I think that's fairly safe to say. So what should be our response?
Yeah.
You didn't care when it was on the other foot, when it was a pretty easy lift. You postured. You didn't care. You didn't act like an ally. You acted like somebody with a point to make. So,
right.
Okay, we got it. It's all in the big book.
All right. So another part of the of what happens here, and we've seen this before when we thought when that maybe there might have been a deal earlier and things like this, is that the stock market is very jittery when it comes to stuff like this, because there's so many effects, particularly because the Strait of Hormuz and the oil flow and everything like that. So we had seen oil go well above $100 a barrel, which has now dropped to about 93 to 94. So it's dropped 13 to 15% today on the news of this ceasefire, which I'm relieved for, because I'm thinking like, okay, I heard the news. I need if I'm going to hedge my bets and see if I guess right. Gas was low in the car. I go and I paid after my discounted BP, I paid 402, and I'm like, I'm just going to put a few gallons in here, and then I'm going to wait, and do my local driving, and then cross my fingers that this thing is real enough that it brings down gas prices, enough that the next time if I need to really fill my tank up, I'll be paying less than I was before. Now I was thinking too, it's like, we're a long way away from seeing it go back to the level it was. It's going to probably take a little bit of time, but I paid almost 50% more for gas today than I did a month and a half ago. That's a huge jump, and this is a problem for the consumers. I've been looking at diesel prices because they kind of fascinate me, because every time I pass by my local stations, they seem to have been stuck on $5.99. It doesn't seem like anybody around here in my local vicinity wants to go to $6, right? They don't want to put the big $6 up there, so they're sticking at $5.99. And today may be the reprieve that they've been looking for, is that they don't have to go there. They can actually start cutting back. Now, you and I both know, because we both said it, that the prices go up a lot faster than they go down. So I don't expect that tomorrow I'm going to see a 30-cent decrease in the price of gasoline, but I do expect in the next few days that we will see some easing that will continue on. And as long as this agreement is in effect and we see progress and maybe reach an ultimate deal, that we'll be able to return to those sub $3 a gallon gas deals. And for Trump and for the Republicans, that's important. I mean, they, from an election standpoint, we're in April, we're about 7 months away, just under that. They need to get that under control, because people see, pocketbook is going to be part of it, among a bunch of whole other things, come November. But when people are paying that much more for gas, it stings. Republicans have used that against the Democrats in the past, and things like that. So we got to get that back down, and so that it's back to a much more reasonable level. And then the stock market took off, which makes me happy, because I'm sitting here going like, all right, how much more money am I losing on paper here? It was only on paper, but psychologically I'm like, oh, this is such a pain in the neck, kind of a thing like that. Especially because since I'm trying to arrange some things for my estate and whatnot, and it just so. But today it was like today's going to be a banner day. It doesn't mean the rest of the week is going to be a banner week, but the market has those really violent reactions, when these swings. So it's way up today. It could sell off a little bit tomorrow, level off, and then who knows where we go, for the next few weeks. But there's a lot more optimism, at least going forward right now, than there was yesterday. Because like I said, Trump's language about obliterating them and and limiting the civilization. Uh, you don't know how much of that he could have or would have done because
Well, I mean,
he
I think what he means by that, he was going to get rid of the mullahs. I don't think he was
yeah.
going to,
Yeah, he wasn't. He
destroy
wasn't.
all
He
of
wasn't.
Iran.
He wasn't going to leave the country with like one person or something like
Right.
that. But still, I mean, the line. He is very emphatic. And with his language and things like that. So people who listen to him, you've got to just think it's like, we don't know. Trump can't. He might be serious and might just ramp up the bombing. That it does take out some more people as well as some of the infrastructure this time.
I think that's one of Trump's most effective weapons is that, like, you don't know you don't know how serious he is about stuff, right? And he put stuff in a way, and like Scott Adams maintained that Trump is one of the best writers around today, right? Because he's trying to evoke thoughts from you, right? And so, what has he evoked here? Just by saying, "I want to take out the mullahs," right? You're like, well, what does he mean? Is he going to kill the whole civilization? Is he going to leave them with one person? Right. So if you're Iran, you're like, what does he mean by all this? Like, how serious is he? What will he do? And that's it. That you kind of got to make a deal there, right? You got to like shut that possible box of consequences off, right? So I mean, I think as he says things that make people rethink what they were going to do, and I think that that's effective, and I think that it's a powerful tool in his box.
Yeah. So, related to that too, we also have the rescue of that downed airman. That was a pretty dramatic thing. I mean, we we can ill afford to lose people during this war. So our servicemen, because the Democrats will just they'll be all over that, and so I was like, oh man, this is not. I don't know. This is pretty bad. I thought at first, but boy, they pulled it off in a miraculous fashion. I think like that, and my hats off to the effort that they made to go retrieve this guy. And I guess he wound up in an area that was a little more ideal for that, for that operation, because I guess the Revolutionary Guard had been, they were out searching for this guy, and this could have been a Mogadishu, Ethiopia,
Yeah.
all kinds of situation, if they had found him. So thank goodness, he was rescued, and
They fooled them a little bit, made them go to the wrong place.
yeah, they did. They did. They pulled that off. That's what's great. It's one of the better, uh, rescues in military history. I think of doing that. It's there are a lot of things I guess in history where some pretty daring rescues, but they kind of pulled the wool over the eyes of the Revolutionary Guard and the Iranian authorities, and which may make them think like well, we're not going to fall for that again should that opportunity arise. But
Right. Yeah. Well, yeah. And so
our,
you keep that from arising.
yeah, yeah,
That's what you do there.
that's exactly.
The other thing is, it appears to be some locals helped a little bit too.
Yeah,
People, Iranians saw him and helped him.
yeah. My wife says that. So she has spent way too much time on YouTube, and so there was a period of time where she watched a lot of YouTube videos by kind of nomadic Iranians, and this life that they lead. And I don't know why she thought it was so fascinating, but I guess, but it was multi-generational too, and kind of how they just would do things. And they really there was nothing there on the land for the most part, but they kind of made what, and I could see, not a heavily populated area, but you have people who are not tied into the regime, right? These
Right.
people are just getting about, day by day with their lives, and you wind up in a situation where you've got people like, oh yeah, we'll kind of run some cover for you and whatnot. And it's like, we have no love lost for the regime. uh you know I think even they
Right.
can see that their lives could be better with someone with freedom for a change.
Yeah. So yeah, that's one thing to think about is about all this is like, Trump is at 47% on Rasmussen today. He's what 43% on RCP average, right? There's probably of the Democrats, there's about 20% of them who would say, whoever's president, he's our president, and patriotism, where the water ends, where the water starts, we're all on the same team and all that. Okay, so you have probably 60% of the people in the country who are not opposed to this, right? Maybe not for it, but not opposed. And in Iran, what percentage of the people of the country, want the mullahs to stay in power? It ain't 60, it ain't 40, it ain't 20, right? It's probably less than 20, right? The people who benefit from the government, live off the government, so forth, they're for it, and everybody else is against it. So, you're talking about a deal. You're operating in a country where, we really are the welcoming. They always say, oh, you expect welcoming, invaders and all this, and like this one, we really are. We really are on the side of right.
Yeah, no, it's just something else. I did want to just throw in here, just even for a brief comment, just like, Trump had his another one of his expletive filled tirades on social media. I mean, I understand, I just wish he would just not do that. You don't have to use those words, okay? Maybe I'm a prude or something like that, but
Well, you
you
know
know,
what? Like I don't like I get into the nasty Twitter fights with people and stuff, and I try not to ever swear.
yeah,
Right. So I hear you on that. I'm the same way. It's like get all that out of our discourse. We're talking to other people. You ought to be able to talk better
yeah.
than that.
Look,
You know,
if you want, if that's what he feels, go ahead and write it, and just never post it.
right?
Put it down.
There's a thing about I see this video from time to time about the coaches, right? And it's like, okay, if you're mad at your coach, right, your kid's coach, right, you don't think you're playing your kid right or playing them enough or treating them right or whatever. So write them a letter. Write that letter out. Put every detail in there. Then put that letter in an envelope and put that envelope in your desk drawer. Right? You get the exercise or you get the satisfaction of writing it, but it doesn't get delivered, because that's what you're just trying to vent, and like, what changes do you want the coach to say, okay, well, this parent wrote me, therefore I will put their son in at starting shortstop, even though he can't catch or throw. You know what I mean? Because then your
Yeah.
kid's out there playing shortstop without being able to catch or throw, and like the embarrassment from that is worse than the sitting on the bench, for the parent, so, it's just another like part of that. Now, as for Trump doing this, his audience is not you and me, obviously. It is the mullahs, and it is, the people who are like trying to figure out or testing or guessing at the level of resolve he has, because like as soon as this ceasefire was announced, all the Democrats ran out and said, Taco, he backed off, he chickened out. The Iranians got everything they wanted, which none of which is true, but that's what they say. That's how they capitalize on it. So, you're sort of damned if you do, damned if you don't. And to those people, because the actual audience is them and the leaders of Iran, that conveys that he's serious and he's frustrated by it, right? And he does not understand why Iran doesn't just complete the transaction and get rid of the mullahs, right? So he's trying to make it painful to the point where they all agree that they got to go.
Yeah, I mean, it's not the first time a president has sworn. I mean, we have LBJ, who is known for having some kind of earthy language and stuff like that, and all that. But he
All
wasn't.
kind of earthy stuff.
Yeah, but Trump has taken it to new heights. It's like for me, I just don't want to hear it. Say it in private or whatever. I mean, I just keep it out of my feed. I mean, if
Yeah.
I don't, if he wants to do that, he has his right to free speech or whatever. But it just kind of, as the president of the United States, as a citizen, I just don't want to hear it from him. So anyway, but it does, I am not his target audience, as you say.
Yeah.
So this is not who he was targeting on this. We had a special election to replace Marjorie Taylor Greene. Clay Fulmer won the seat. Uh, the opponent Sean Harris. Now he had run against Marjorie Taylor Greene before. The last election in 2024, she pretty much walloped him. Uh, Fulmer beat Harris, but just not by as wide a margin. But it's a special election. The Democrats are dancing, they're dancing all over the place with this election, as well as the bigger victory they had in Wisconsin, I guess with their Supreme Court judge or whatever justice. Uh, Wisconsin has been, I don't know, things are going backwards for the Republicans in Wisconsin. They've really they've been losing ground there. But I don't, Fulmer, not a problem. He's going to win the election in November, and the margin will be closer to what Marjorie Taylor Greene had, I think. The Democrats shouldn't look too much to some of these because a lot of them tend to be much lower turnout. And the Democrats have whipped up the vote and the anti-Trump sentiment and whatnot. And I think by November we're going to see a different picture there when it comes to actually voting for the midterms.
So if Trump's not on the ballot, it's about 8 or 10 points harder for Republicans. So she was 68% in 2024 with Trump on the ballot. He was 56%. 56.
I think she was 64.
So that about accounts for it, right?
Yeah, it's right in your range.
Specials. The Democrats say they're great at specials, but they have a losing record right now in specials. They're like 5 and 6 or something like that. The generics have all closed up to basically even. The generic congressional ballots, would you elect a Republican or a Democrat if it was held today? The money is all, I think the Democrats, the Republicans have about 15 times as much money as the Democrats do for congressional election war chest. And Trump was he's at 47 today. He had a bad overnight, but he's probably going to have a lot better overnight tomorrow, given to the peace deal and the price of oil stabilizing and so forth. So it is not flowing the Democrats' way as they thought they would. They're still, since they're, the way they talk to their people is different, right? Because they hide bad news and oversell good news. Their people don't know about it. You go on Twitter, they're still assuming they'll have a 20 vote, 30 vote majority in the House after this election, and they'll control the Senate. And it now looks like the people who predict the Senate now say that that's probably a bridge too far. They still have a chance to take the House, but they won't take the Senate. And they think hey, midterm, we're going to just crush all this. And Pete spent the last 2 years impeaching Trump for everything we can think of. But right now, the momentum is all flowing the other way. It's a long way until November, and like we were talking about earlier, those decisions on who you're going to vote for start to harden in the summer, right? Late July, August, people start, okay, this one's not good, that one is good, and then once you get to Labor Day, there's not. You get down, someone will come out with a poll the first week of September that says they're 8% undecideds, 6% undecideds. So then you're fighting an election over those people, right? And everybody else has gone where they're going to go. So, the timing's really important. The Republicans need to show some victories and show some momentum in the near term in order to be successful in November. Fortunately, it does begin to look like they are. They're, the momentum's in their favor right now. Might not stay that way, but that's the way it is now.
Yeah, it's still, like I said, it's still just under 7 months away, so still a lot can change. But as you have pointed out many times, is that decisions are made, well before the ballots are cast, and we're casting ballots earlier and earlier and earlier, which is just got to stop.
Right, which is another trend Trump's trying to address. And I think if we win the midterms, the other thing is like, how does this figure in? So there's this court case, Calais versus Louisiana, which has not been decided yet. And what it is over whether you have mandatory minority black districts, right? So like Louisiana was ordered to create 2 additional districts that have more black people in them than white people. And so like in one case, Shreveport is 8 miles from Texas, about 40 miles from Arkansas. So way up in the northwest corner of the state. Baton Rouge is on the I-10 corridor in the south of the state. One of these districts is it's like a very thin, weird looking football from Shreveport down to the northern edge of Baton Rouge and back. Okay, now there's nothing, you can barely argue that that's contiguous, but does not, the interest of those people, is not the same, right? This has been concocted to address the minority voting problem, right? Supposedly. So that, whatever the Supreme Court is going to do on that, they kind of need to do it pretty quick because some of these districts are going to change. You might not be having the right primary now. You might not be running in the district you live in, right? Because you don't know. So, there's I think there's like 7 or 8 states that have maps ready to go, if this changes. So you can probably guess what they are. The South, the states that had the pre-clearance rules, right? And under the Voting Rights Act. So, the landscape could change dramatically in the near term. And, the Democrats, their best hope is that the Supreme Court rules that you do still have to have black majority districts, in which case they have the status quo. If they lose the case, it could be 10 to 15 to 20 seats that go the other way.
Yeah. So this thought just occurred to me, which is kind of a neither here or there necessarily, but the one thing that would draw me back to standing in line, or at least make my life easier to standing in line to vote, is kind of what the big airports do. Now, this is going to be a tough thing to do, but you could choose the larger precincts, in an area, and create some kind of an app or whatever, and system where, you've got election judges and other people that are working at the polls, where they would basically update information for other people, saying like, oh, wait time is 5 minutes, or wait time is 10 minutes, or wait time is an hour, or whatever. I check that for TSA wait times just to see, and I definitely did it during the worst period of time, because I was just curious to see what the TSA effect was at, say, BWI, which at least initially I saw that was pretty minimal. Just something to say, because I know that there are some peak periods, some things that are just where it gets backed up. But I think sometimes it helps, if they actually studied this, they could try to probably even out the flow a little bit better, so that you don't have lines, that will take you an hour to get in to vote, which the media makes a big deal of. Those things the states have got to fix, in terms of that. But nevertheless, this, like I said, the voting for days and months and whatever it's gotten ridiculous. These minority districts that are decreed, like, look, we're the United States of America. Yeah, let the chips fall where they may, but have some honest, redistricting, so that there are. And if it favors the Democrats, okay, I'm not going to be happy with it, but that's fine. Favors Republicans, fine, that'll be great. But this carving out of things where the law says you have to have a district, so that a black can get elected. I mean, it's like, to me, now we were like, now you're just pandering to me.
Yeah, that's cartoonishly racist, right? And you could argue like in the past, okay, you're addressing some inequalities that you hadn't been able to move them any other way.
Yeah.
Okay, but that's not the case anymore. Like, you have black people, Steve Cohen, white guy, Jewish white guy, represents one of the blackest districts in the country in Memphis, right? He tries to get into the congressional black caucus and they won't let him. And it's like, Steve, poor Steve, right? Because, he should be in there. That's who he's representing. Like, that's almost all black district. So it's like, we don't need that anymore. The Supreme Court was right to get rid of pre-clearance requirements. And the South is not the same. It's like we're not fighting the Civil War down there anymore. Yeah, it's ridiculous. It's the whole thing is.
Well, it's become everybody, all these the Hispanics, and they become like a special class of citizens, and so you need to have certain amount of seats set aside to do this. It's like that's not what the founding fathers were
right. And the thing about the racist connotation of what they're saying here, that only a black person can represent black people. Right. I can't be a good congressman and just go advocate for my people, and their interests, accrue by race, right? So like there are black interests, right? Really? In 2026, right? Aren't we kind of all trying to get all the boats lifted? You know what I mean? It's like, the assumption that, there's so much that must be addressed by race, to me, is racist. I just don't think there's that much there's that much. It's like, it's on Facebook, the reels. Okay. So I get this guy, he's a black guy and he's from Mississippi, and he comes on and he says, what do them old folks call whatever, what's the word for it? And it's like, the other one today was backpack, kids carry a backpack to school. It goes, what do they call that down south? They don't call it nothing a backpack down south. What's the word they use? They use satchel. You carry your stuff in a satchel. And it's like, I get all the answers, right? Every time he asks one of those questions, like, I know that one, right? Because, he was black in Mississippi. I was white in Louisiana, but like, we heard all the same stuff, right? Being of the different races really didn't change our experience growing up in this area all that much, right? Our relatives acted the same. Our language was the same. The expressions that, we used were the same. So it's like, one of the things that really occurs to me about this is like, we aren't that different. Like, and whose interest is it to go around talking about the differences, right? And keeping that fight alive, right? Not mine, not most Americans. And I think you see a lot of black people now saying, and I think it's also interesting along the same line, Trump got probably somewhere in the 20s, 26, 27% of the black vote in the last election. George W. Bush got 8. Okay. We went from 8 to 27. And now his support among blacks is down to 12 or 13. Okay. So, that's okay to me, because that means, he wasn't a president for the black person. He was a president for America, and black people, X amount of black people looked at his policies and said, I was on the train, but I'm not anymore. Okay. So, or I'm not on any train, or I only was inspired that one time, or whatever. Right. But, it's not racial ID. Something else is making them get on and off the Trump train. Right. And it's like the real issues that confront America, whatever that is. I mean, that's what needs to be addressed. It's not race.
All right. So I'm waiting for Target to say in September, get your back to school satchel.
Only down south. Northern Targets ain't saying it.
And just watch heads explode in Massachusetts.
Yeah, that's right. The other one was, what do you call what a woman has, keeps all her license and her money and all that in? Right? A pocketbook. Right? That's a Southern thing. No one calls it that here, right? That's purse or whatever.
Yeah.
So, I mean, it's interesting, like all the little expressions, and like, and it's like my childhood just dishes up every one of those answers. It's unbelievable. And I'll go look up what's the answer, and that's what everyone else said. So
I'm sure Jeff Foxworthy would know all those answers.
Yeah, I bet he would. Yeah.
All right. Some more things on allow quickly. Artemis 2. Okay, so look, I'm kind of stuck in the middle on the space program. I'm glad that we have a private, system kind of going with NASA. I think that tends to work better than government and all of this. It is a ton of money, which kind of, I always kind of like, but then when I do see them go out there and do these things, I am kind of awed and amazed by stuff that they do. And they've gone further than anybody else is in space, right? They're on the dark side of the moon. They're doing all this stuff. It's pretty amazing. Everything that's gone on this trip. They had a backed up toilet, and one of the female, she fixed it. What good for them and stuff like
Not
that.
going into a gross toilet. That's why you need a woman on those missions. Guys would be like, it's okay. Whatever.
True. And then the greatest marketing thing ever is when the Nutella jar floated across the screen.
Oh yeah. Yeah, I think Nutella was kind of that was sort of a creation of the space industry.
I don't know.
Like they came up with that as spaceship food.
I mean, I just remember Tang when I was a kid, right? I mean,
Tang was in that class too.
That was the big thing. But, and Nutella is kind of like, I'm not a huge Nutella fan. I know people, you can go to Costco and you can get these multi-pack jars and people scoop them off the shelves and stuff like that. I rarely eat Nutella. I mean, it's good, but I don't, but I don't have the same passion that a lot of Americans do for that.
Yeah.
But I just thought that, if you're the owners of Nutella and you see this happening in space, you're like, oh my gosh, we just scored one of the greatest advertising marketing things ever. Yeah, and all of that. And that's
it's like, with our think tanks, like the president mentions your findings. Woo!
Yeah, right. Oh, yeah, every time. Right. I mean, look, we go back, to even back in the days when the Drudge Report was decent.
Relevant.
Yeah, right. That getting mentioned on the Drudge Report was worth a lot. I mean, your the views to your website, your articles, and everything this would spike.
Right.
And so there's always seemed to be kind of a race going on between people. Just like, I need to make it Drudge worthy, somehow get their attention and stuff like that. So
did that guy set some money on fire?
Yeah.
Just like talk about bonehead business decisions.
Yeah, I don't understand how some of these things have happened, but whatever. Also, along the same lines of food or whatever, I don't know if you saw this thing. I guess it was from TikTok. Somebody had posted on X that the governor of Massachusetts, I think her name is Maura Healey, she was talking about energy, wind energy, solar energy, and she put it all. She used Dunkin' Munchkins for this. Okay, now Dunkin', is I think they're based in Massachusetts. That's where their headquarters is and everything like this. So this is a big deal. It's kind of like a homegrown, it's one of their businesses. But I don't know if you saw, she had this cup full of Munchkins and stuff like that, and she goes, this glazed Munchkin represents solar power. And then this one, and then she picked up like a chocolate one or whatever, and this one represents wind energy. And she goes on to this, commentary about, how the Trump administration or whatever, is doing away and harming, all the citizens and stuff like that. And then she dumps them all in the box and talks about how, this is all of, our green energy and everything like this. It's like, yeah, but you just totally avoid the point of that. This green energy stuff is costing consumers money.
Right. And it's not efficient. It doesn't really work. You still got to have the other energy behind it. Did you see she and the mayor of Boston threw out the first pitch, the first game of the season at Fenway, and they were booed off the field?
I heard there was some booing. Yeah, that's right. I remember that.
It was ugly. It was.
I heard that Wes Moore was booed in Baltimore. But
yes, he was. He was booed off. He was booed too.
Yeah. I mean, we've heard about Trump getting booed, but it's kind of unusual for liberal politicians to get booed in towns that are pretty liberal.
Yeah. How about that? But I think it's like a lot of this stuff. I think it's coming to a head.
Yeah.
I think people have had enough.
Yep, I think that's right. All right, so last few topics here. So the Department of Education is rescinding this Biden era, Obama era agreements that it's only with it's like 4 school districts and Taft College in California at this point. That's on protecting transgender rights, but they had already had this go through the courts, and so the law was really on their side at this point in time. But once again, special class of citizens. The Obama and Biden administrations had taken Title IX protections and extended it beyond the original interpretation. And now, Trump administration is basically putting it back to where it was before. I'm sure just like a lot of things. I mean, the Trump administration with transgender rights. I mean, obviously, transgender people are howling about everything like this, but the whole. I mean, this covered, the separate bathrooms. This covered the boys or men playing girls, female, women's sports.
Right.
Things that are actually pretty important, I think.
Yeah, yeah, and a good thing they did. I guess there was a court ruling on that one in the last day or so too. Went their way. That went the Trump administration's way on the transgender. Right.
Yeah.
Oh, and there's research out this very morning, saying that that big longitudinal study. I guess Finland followed every person who transformed, or whatever, for 24 years, and what they found out is it doesn't help your mental health. The argument that we do this to save the mental health of the people involved is rubbish. It doesn't do anything positive to help them. So, why are we doing it? Why are we ever letting kids do it? I had somebody, I talking to a kid, lady's about 21, 22 years old. And she assured me, like just cocksure, looked at me and said, they don't do child sex trans surgeries in the United States. And I'm like, oh yeah, they do. And I sent her some stuff, and I got events. I see her on her phone reading the whole thing through. So finally she's like, yeah, I didn't realize that they actually did this. I'm like, yeah. She goes, well, I don't think that's right.
Yeah. No, I mean, things that the kids do. I mean, yeah, it's like, the lobby for these group of individuals makes you think that once they transition to the other sex or whatever, that all their mental health issues will go away.
Yeah, it cures it. They treat it as a cure, and it's not.
Like it goes like that, and it's not. I mean, you have those issues. Those issues are still going to carry over. It's just now you've got a different body in the sense of it's got different components to it and kind of thing like that. This is not the cure-all, end-all by any stretch of the imagination. And in some cases, I think they find that it probably made it worse.
Yeah.
So
because then you have like, I've ruined my body and it's not even what I want.
Yeah, I've got a friend of mine who he puts out a family newsletter every once in a while, and he puts it out on Facebook or puts a link to it, and I try to read it because he's actually a pretty good writer, and he's pretty open about what happens with the family and some of the other things, and his highs and lows, and he had a daughter who had her breasts removed, and I'm thinking like, well, that's the serious stuff. I feel for him, and his wife, because this is not what a parent expects that their children will do, but that's a serious thing. I mean, I don't know that it solves whatever issues this girl was having, and stuff, but these kinds of things, people are, the butchering of the bodies is out there.
Yeah, that's right.
So, one of your favorite topics, so that's why I threw this in. So to me, Amazon has thrown the United Postal Service a lifeline here by not totally cutting them off from package delivery. So they've reduced them. They're going to do, I think, what was it, 80% or something like that. And so,
well, there's the value of the Postal Service is at this point is the delivery network, right? They can deliver to every house in the U.S. and Amazon doesn't really want to have to produce that.
Right. Service. I mean, really, what it's coming down to is Amazon is gearing up towards where, as long as the Postal Service stays in business and they're mandated on the last mile to deliver to every address in America, Amazon will continue to build their network so that they can get to your place, my place, our cousins and whatever, aunts and uncles and all that stuff. But the ones that live in the far reaches that are really hard to get to and would be extremely expensive for Amazon to deliver to,
Right.
hand it off.
Yeah, Amazon is, they've long, abused the postal system. They've made the deal where, it costs the postal system $3.46 to deliver a package for Amazon, and they charge them $2.
Yeah.
So like the more they took advantage of it, the worse it was. So Amazon is no friend of the postal service. They're not doing them any favors.
No, but the postal service, I mean, look, they're not blameless. I mean, they signed the contract.
Exactly. Yeah, absolutely. But don't mistake them for not being a predator, because they absolutely are.
Look, it's another, it's not technically a government agency, I guess, but it's just another it's showing it's like, our government, when all these agencies or whatever's quasi agencies, they're terribly managed. I mean, and as you mentioned, DeJoy tried to really put them in shape and and stuff like that. I guess the new person is trying even harder, but I get he was he sounded the warning bell that that this is we cannot maintain this operation as in its current fashion, and they've really got to modernize and just streamline the operation. We don't, I've talked. We don't need the mail every day of the week. We don't need all of these post offices. You've got to cut a lot of this overhead out.
Right.
So, and then finally we finish with the NCAA tournament. Michigan triumphs over Connecticut, and so I don't know. I think I had 7 brackets. One or two of them, I guess a couple of them had picked Michigan. So, but so that was good. But I think that my best bracket was at 93% according to ESPN.
That's a way better than any of mine.
Yeah,
men or women.
I had like 4 at 50%, and I think I had another one like at 80 or whatever. But yeah, I mean, they deserved it. They put on a good performance, and they were a great team. And we had, I mean, it was an interesting tournament because you didn't have anybody undefeated in the tournament, right? So there was chances, and a lot of these teams had lost, 3 or 4 games, and they had their ups and downs during the year and stuff. And it's like, yeah, it could have gone UConn's way, Arizona, could have been theirs too. I mean, just never know.
Yeah, but they got demolished.
Yeah, man, did they? Yeah.
So here's the thing about this. Okay, so Kurt Signetti goes to Indiana, never won anything in football, and they win it in 2 years. Pat, what's his name? The guy at Michigan, the basketball coach.
I thought it was Dustin May.
Dustin May, that's right. He goes there 2 years. He wins a national, right? So so every coach in America now, you got 2 years, like to win a natty, not to win a conference, but to win a natty, or you're not doing this as well as the others, right? You're falling behind the pack. So like, I think about Lane Kiffin at LSU. I saw this thing on Facebook, like, predict their record. And of course, all the LSU guys, national championship, 12-0, 11-1 at worst, and I'm like, I'm looking at the schedule and I'm like, 8-4 is a pretty good record considering what they're doing. And he has to rebuild the roster because every time you're new and you go into these places, many of your players quit and go somewhere else, and you have to go find new players, blah, 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 blah. Right. So, but he has 2 years. Like, he can go 8-4 this year, but next year, if he's on the Dustin May, Kurt Signetti level, he needs to win a national championship. Right. So it's not less pressure on coaches. It's much more because of what happened here. Right. That was 2 quick turnarounds.
Yeah. Well, I mean, the face. I mean, we know, college sports has changed dramatically because of NIL, the transfer portal, and all these kind of things. But yeah, I mean, the days of when you could post, you could post winning records of 8-4, 10-2, and whatever, and all that. But if you didn't get into that playoff picture, if you didn't win a natty, you could be out on your ear very easily. The the timeline, the patience for this is very thin. And you could wind up like the Lady Vols. They have one person left on their team.
I think she quit. I think they're down. Right. And think about that. Okay, so there's a program, the first 38 years of the NCAA women's tournament, they made the Elite Eight. 38 years. They won 8 of them, right? And now, they don't make the tournament. They don't get into what do they do? They lost in the quarterfinals of the SECs, and they have no scholarship players. Like, how does that happen? It's like, because it's about the coach in college sports. It's all about finding the right coach.
Yeah. Well, I mean,
so to the extent that almost nothing else matters.
Yeah.
Women's tournament was kind of a bizarre ending, right? So, Connecticut got pummeled by South Carolina, which then got pummeled by UCLA. So I don't think that was anybody's predicted outcome in this, but there they are. And now that lady, so then they had to just show you how this all goes. So they had the way too early top 25 for women next year. And they put UCLA in it after rolling to the national championship. They're somewhere in the 20s, 21 or 22. And he said, if they hadn't won a national championship, we probably would not have ranked them at all because they've already lost so many players. They had 6 seniors. So it's not all NIL, right? It's people who graduated. They have no more eligibility.
And those seniors were responsible for a lot of their points.
Right, exactly. So, I mean, she has got to rebuild like pretty much close to from scratch.
Yeah. All right, everybody. That's the end of Sports Talk with Don and Brian. But anyway, we appreciate you joining us today, and hope you enjoyed even the sports talk, because I think that's always fun to do here at the end. As always, please stay safe and stay well. Remember, we live in the greatest country in the world. Do not let them tell you otherwise. And always, God bless America. And we will see you again at our regular day and time next week.